Well, first of all, Sinn Féin welcomes the publication of the Personal Insolvency Bill. It's long overdue, and hundreds of thousands of families are eagerly awaiting the outcome of this legislation. It's very detailed. There's over 200 pages in it. I've just been with a briefing of the senior Department of Justice officials teasing out some of the details in this legislation. And I must say, on my initial reading, that many people, many families who are in difficulty, particularly with their mortgages, will find it as a disappointing solution to their problems, particularly given that the power rests substantially with the banks, and many people have been engaged with the banks. They have not been able to have an appropriate solution that allows them to stay in their home and have the debt written down so that they can service the portion of the debt that they can afford. This Personal Insolvency Bill gives the power to the banks in the majority of cases to veto any decision, which would leave only the outcome of bankruptcy for many families, which means that those families would lose all of their assets, including their family home. So it's disappointing. Sinn Féin have called for an independent agency to be established. There isn't such an agency included in this bill. The difference between our approach and the government's approach is that the agency that we have called for would be able to have a prescription imposed upon the debtor and the creditor that would be legally binding and wouldn't allow the power to rest solely with the banks.
Brendan Howland this morning coming out and saying that he'd like to see a review of allowances for staff from the Department of Foreign Affairs based overseas. Presumably this is something that you would be welcoming and want to see a review of this?
Well, I'm aware that Minister Howland has been carrying out a review of allowances. I would like to see that review. In fact, to date, the Minister has even failed to provide us with a list of the allowances that are payable. I think it's entirely reasonable for any of these things to be reviewed. I think it's entirely reasonable where there is an excessive payment or an inappropriate payment that matter is dealt with. But we need to see the whole picture. And I have to say, I'm not comfortable with the idea of dealing with one issue in isolation. So the Minister states that he's concerned about allowances. So let him publish now the full list of allowances, the full cost of those allowances, line by line, and let's have a full debate on it. And where there is waste or where there are inappropriate payments being made, let's sort that out and deal with it. I do want to say that I understand anxiety amongst public sector workers in general, particularly people on middle and low wages, that there's a bit of a rear guard action against the Croke Park Agreement and against their rates of pay, and these are workers who have already taken very considerable hits in their pockets. So what the Minister can do for the purposes of transparency and fairness is publish the full list of allowances. I'm calling on him to do that. Tell us the full cost of that, and then let's have a full, informed, fair and frank debate. And where there are excesses or inappropriate payments, let's weed them out and let's deal with them now.
Thanks a lot, Mary.
I think today was a very important and historic occasion. It was the first time that the Orange Order addressed the Seanad and the Oireachtas. That is significant. It was also the first time that the Orange Order engaged directly and publicly with Sinn Féin. And while we are encouraged by that direct engagement, I think it's very important that we build upon today's progress and use the occasion to, as the Grand Secretary of the Orange Order said, to enable today's opportunity to act as a springboard for the future. And that springboard and a new shared future can only be built on the principles of mutual respect, of tolerance and of shared understanding. And for that to happen, there needs to be direct talking and dialogue between the Orange Order and representatives of the communities of which the Orange Order seek to march through. Of course, it's important and it's historic that they are engaging directly with Sinn Féin through this forum, but they need to meet with us directly on a continuous basis, and they also need to engage directly with those residents' associations. And for us, dialogue is the best way to deal with many of the differences that communities that we represent have with the Orange Order.
Well, I think the fact that the Secretary was here, that he made a speech at all, was very significant. I thought his remarks were measured. You know, others may take a different view of it, but in all of these matters, all of these initiatives, it's what we do about building on it. It's what comes from it. So Sinn Féin welcomes very much today's engagement. We would like to see as was said by Mr. Nelson, that this could be a springboard. Well, let's try and build upon that. Dialogue obviously is crucial. That was acknowledged a number of times. Sinn Féin's at one with him when he talks, quoting the proclamation of cherishing all the children of the nation equally. He drew attention to the plight of Protestant schools, and we're with him on that. Also, every child in our real republic should be cherished. We should be religious blind. We should not be at all concerned about the background or the authenticity of any person. So there's lots of common areas here that we can build upon, but we'll only do it if there's dialogue, and we would very actively encourage, as I have been doing and others in Sinn Féin have been doing for years, the Orange Order to talk to their neighbours, to talk to host communities, and to talk to Sinn Féin.
So we as the Seanad team are here to launch the Seanad PMB today on the rent supplement. Huge issues at the moment in this state. We have 94,000 people on rent supplement in the state. That's being reviewed at presence, and tenants are being asked to go back to their landlords, renegotiate their rents because of the reduced rates. We feel this is very unfair. It's not fair to put the tenants in this position, and it's very unfair on a lot of landlords as well who aren't in a position to reduce the rates. We're calling on the government to intervene, to find another mechanism to renegotiate the rent supplement levels downwards. That is fair and equitable to everybody in the short term, but then to address the larger and the wider problem of providing social housing through the local authorities to those 100,000 people who are on the waiting list and the 94,000 people in receipt of rent supplement. And we're hoping to debate all these issues today in the Seanad.
Well, I'm here supporting all the residents over the cuts in rental subsidy. It's an absolute scandal that rental subsidies are now being cut between 8 and 10%, and people are being forced to go and negotiate with their landlords. And if they can't negotiate with their landlords, they're being forced to go looking elsewhere to get houses at the value that has been determined by a community welfare officer. It is an absolute scandal. We're effectively forcing people into homeless situations.
Lone parents, disabled, aged, loads of people have been affected by this, but there's one thing they have in common: they didn't cause the crisis, and they're the ones paying the price. There are 96,800 people claiming rent allowance. That's not their fault. The housing crisis, the property bubble, pushed people that would normally be able to afford their own homes onto a social housing list at a time when the government decided not to provide social housing. Even somebody on an average industrial wage could not afford to get into the property market. They couldn't even afford to rent. They were put on a social housing list. What did the government do? They decided, we have money, we'll throw money at the problem. They didn't invest in the future, they didn't invest in properties. No, they threw money at mortgage interest, rent supplement, which lined landlords' pockets. That's what they chose to do. It was an expensive but shortcut way. Now they don't have that money, they don't have the expense to do it. So what do? They're forcing tenants to negotiate personally, and that's wrong. They created the problem. The landlords benefited from the problem, and it's tenants in individual cases who have to go and try to resolve the problem. That's wrong. We have to turn it on its head and put the problem firmly back where it belongs, not in the arms of vulnerable people. Everybody should stand together. Lone parents, disabled, anybody who needs social housing. We didn't cause the problem, and we're not going to solve it for them. Give it back to them, let them deal with it.
Today, Oireachtas members from both the Dáil and Seanad, and indeed local councillors who have travelled from the Cavan Monaghan Meath area, have gathered here to welcome representatives of the Lagan Brick workers, 25 of whom have been in protest now for 204 days today. It's the longest running industrial protest situation anywhere on the island of Ireland currently, and far exceeds the Vita Cortex issue in County Cork after 160 days finally resolved. These workers, since the 15th of December, have been in a lockout situation, offered only statutory redundancy, despite the fact that as brick workers they have between them some 600 years of combined service. every one of them in excess of 20 years, more with 30, and one man with 43 years here in service to Lagan Brick, Kingscourt Brick and the Laggan family. And they are being, sadly, up to this point in time, ignored in terms of what we believe are their rights in terms of labour law and their rights in terms of moral responsibility on the part of employers. Our meeting here today, briefing TDs and senators, and I'm happy to report that we had TDs and senators from all parties and non-party gathered here in the audiovisual room in Leinster House, who have pledged their 100% support for this group of workers. And I want to say that they have been joined as well here today by wives and children, because this is not only a story of 25 workers in dispute with their employers for the past 204 days. It's the story of families trying to make good, trying to get by, totally dependent on a fraction of what their husbands had created, had earned over many, many years of steady employment.
I just let you know that on the 15th of December we lost our jobs. Apart from losing our jobs, our lives has been torn apart by financially we have been ripped back from a good wage to the dole of 230 or 40 euro a week when you have 3 or 4 kids, a wife, mortgage, pay for cars, trying to keep house going. And I'm only speaking, I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the rest of the lads, 23 or 4 boys there that has mortgages, and it's not handy. And I only ask that justice should be given to every man that loses his job. He should be shown respect for giving extra money. I'm there 23 years, one behind me 43 years, lost his job. It's a poor way to finish up. All we're looking for is that the government change all this legislation, and that anyone that's lose their jobs is shown respect and has something to look back on and say, right, I have a decent package to get away and I can move on with my life.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all the deputies for turning out today. We had a great show in there from cross parties. I'd like to just mention Kevin in particular for setting up this today. All we want is fair play. Now, hopefully we have a meeting with the company next week, and we're hopeful of a successful outcome. Whether it's achievable or not, I don't know. All I would say to the company is come to the table and talk to us. That's all we need.
Thank you.